Probably do. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's balloon time. For those of you who don't know who I am, I can't fathom that that's possibly the case, not because I have an ego, but just because I'm up here often enough. My name is Canon Donlon. I'm the Canon for Ecclesiastical Affairs for the Anglican Mission, which as a ministry partner of Forward in Faith and FIFNA, I represent a lot of those entities in a global conversation regarding Catholicity and being Anglican. So what I try to do every year is try to give you an update as how those conversations affect Forward in Faith in particular. So this is kind of looking back at 2014. You've got the screens there. That's far more important than looking at me. So if you turn towards the screens, that would be better served. As you can see from the screen, we have bubbles. So that will set the theme for the rest of the conversation this morning. A few years ago, you were first presented with this. You might remember. It is the infamous bubble map. It's been updated now for 2014. And I won't get into all the nuts and bolts of it. But the point is, as you can see, that there's still a lot of bubbles globally, and therefore still a lot of work to be done. Now, some people look at this bubble map, and of course it's related to all things Anglican, some of it on the revisionist side, which represents the left side, and the Orthodox side, which represents the right side of the center, where it says Anglican Realignment 2014. So obviously, the green and the orange people, they're like Martians. We know they exist. We don't have a lot of conversation with them unless they come and pay a personal visit. I'm not accusing anybody of that personally being a Martian. I'm just simply saying they're not in our universe. They're not in our sphere. But everybody from the center over tends to be. And a lot of those names would be familiar to you. Cana, AAC, ACNA, Forward in Faith, Anglican Mission, FIFNA, the Continuum, etc. And so that landscape hasn't changed, unfortunately. In the USA, however, we shouldn't just pick on what it looks like globally. This is just a quick summary of what it looks like in the United States with various jurisdictions, some of which are familiar to you because you might be members of them, others of which are familiar to you because of the genesis of events since 1977. And so I won't go blow by blow on all those, but I think you get an idea that the bubble map globally is not the only place where the bubbles tend to bump into each other, because the fact of the matter is, in the United States and in North America, this is what it looks like. So we call it the you heard Bishop Sutton say this, the non-Roman Catholic, and Bishop Lipka as well, the non-Roman Catholic realignment. And so if you take a look at that, you see a lot of names that were on the previous slide. Not to mention, there are other players in the global scheme. And so we have a European Catholic realignment going on, who we've been in conversation with. We have a North American realignment going on, who obviously, by virtue of being gathered here today, we are in realignment with. So we have North America and Europe in realignment. And of course, what's now emerging in Africa is an African realignment, because things continue to dissipate there in terms of the relationships for Anglicans. GAFCON, Global South, Kappa, the Conference of Anglican Provinces in Africa, all have subdivided by virtue of the revisionism that's found its way now to Africa. And so by next year, I anticipate when we do this, we'll have a whole African piece involved. I hope that's not the case, but certainly the trajectory seems to be that's the direction where events are moving. So that's what it looks like on the American scheme. So what do? Well, I try to keep the bubbles in conversation and not burst into each other, because there are histories with all these bubbles. Some of them are positive, some of them are painful, some of them are acrimonious, and we try to do some healing with those. For the European realignment, those are effectively new conversations that are born out of the Forward in Faith Relationship UK. As Bishop Ackerman, I don't know if he alluded to it here, or certainly was in the council, the Forward in Faith UK is going through its own identity questions as it faces the changes of General Synod in conversation yet this very moment. And as you know, they have entertained in a serious way the question of women in the episcopate, and that is going to change the landscape for Catholicity in Northern Europe, both in Anglican circles and beyond Anglican circles. So that's what the lay of the land looks like. So you've got a new bubble map to digest as we go forward. When we go to two international gatherings, and there have been 3 I've been to this year, what are the guidelines? Do I just kind of make this up as I go along? I know that a lot of people suggest that, but I don't. We try to use the objects of the Oxford movement, which, if you don't know what they are, in their original supposition, they are to vindicate the Catholic position of the Church of England, which would now be the Anglican tradition, to reassert its identity with a pre-Reformation church in England. Thirdly, to insist on the continuity of apostolic succession as the highest value, to affirm episcopal order to that point, to emphasize the importance of the sacraments, to enhance the ideal of work for justice through acts of charity. This is not a surprise to anybody in this room, I suspect, given your long-standing relationship in Forward in Faith and the values thereof. However, because Anglicanism has tended to lost its way, and there are many misperceptions about what it means to be Anglican globally, these things have to be reasserted and reaffirmed with some people in conversation. They don't believe that Anglicans stand for that, and believe it or not, they don't even believe Anglican Catholics stand for that anymore. That's not because we don't, but it's because there's been so much misperception that's gone on. Of course, Anglican television would never do that, but there are other people who do that around the globe, and we thank Kevin for his work in that area. So as you go back to that previous slide, that this is what guides the conversations, you have to ask, what are the structures that try to implement these conversations on behalf of Forward in Faith? And there's not a whole heck of a lot of them, but there are a few. One is Forward in Faith itself. You saw on the slide that Dr. Howell showed you that Forward in Faith is not a self-contained entity in North America. There is a United Kingdom branch which will probably see another iteration of itself as time goes forward. And there's Australasia that is not unimportant, and Brother Kurt could probably tell you the most about that if you want to get some information about it. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be helpful. But that's Forward in Faith is emerging. There is a slow groundswell for Forward in Faith Africa. And there are a number of bishops who have become, what's the word, Bishop Ackerman, we use for those partner bishops? They're called Episcopal, the bishops who are from Africa. There's a word for them. Episcopal advisors. And they don't quite have chapters of Forward in Faith on the ground yet, but they want to, and they see a need to. And I've recently been in Africa to try to help that process along. Then there's FACA, the Federation of Anglican Churches in America. Its president and chair is Bishop Hewitt. Bishop Hewitt, if you'd stand, I think everybody knows who you are. The last time Bishop Hewitt got called upon in this instance, he was out of the room when we were in the United Kingdom, so I'm glad he's here. And he does a good job at facilitating a lot of these conversations locally and globally. You heard a little bit from Bishop Lipka about the Union of Scranton. That's become an important conversation as far as a lot of these conversations with Anglican, Catholic, non-Catholic realignment are concerned, independent of any conversations that involve ACNA. For example, the Anglican Association is very much involved in Unionist Grant, and they are independent of ACNA, as you well know. Then, of course, you've heard in the last 24 hours the call for an Anglican Catholic Congress. That's a structure to go forward that should facilitate all those bubbles being in a meaningful dialogue to renew a Catholic ecclesiology along the lines of those 6 principles that I just outlined in the previous slide. Everybody with me so far? Am I making some sort of sense? Is kind of logical and coherent? Well, as much as that's possible in my case. And so the vocation of the Anglo-Catholic movement, if you take these structures and you take those principles, I'm trying to give you an idea, this is how we go forward in these travels. There's a way forward, and that is really to remember from whence we came. This is not a theology class, but we try to say when we make these visits that we have a vocation as Anglican Catholics to restore the divine image which has been hidden from time to time in the life of the church. Secondly, it's a responsibility, it's a holy responsibility that we have, all of us. It's one that I've been given some responsibility for directly. And so the conversations are always about teaching the truth in an age that does not believe in objective truth. And again, you would say, well, that's a given, isn't it? Again, that's not the perception that is consistent about being Anglican anymore. So we have to reiterate that even as Forward in Faith. Because frankly, even Forward in Faith, not North America, has been accused perhaps of capitulating from time to time. And that may or may not be the case, but that's certainly the accusation. And so as we look towards a preferred future, we have to re-articulate these things in the context that we are not bankrupt ideologically, spiritually, or theologically, but rather we have a wellspring that we want to offer people. And so the ultimate goal in these conversations is not to get more members for Forward in Faith. It's not to create more alliances. That may well be byproducts, and byproducts that we welcome. The ultimate goal, of course, is to win souls for Christ. Salus animarum suprema lex, saving souls is the highest law, as Augustine wrote, paraphrasing good old St. Paul. And so this is the ultimate end game. And so the future of Anglo-Catholicism and of the whole church depends less on our work than on our ability to inflame our neighbors' hearts. These conversations that we have globally are simply vehicles to rekindle the flame. They are not an end in and of itself. And it's not because I like to accumulate frequent flyer miles. So as a result, we go to places. You know that line, what was that movie? He sees people or he sees ghosts. We go to places. This past year, we've been to Sweden, we've been to Norway, and just recently returned from Africa, East Africa, last week. Bishop Hewitt, as you see in the top slide, was with me on the Sweden trip. That's Bishop Rolf Flemsted, the Bishop of the Nordic Catholic Church, and Bishop Göran Beyer, one of the bishops from the Mission Province, Sweden. Again, Sweden and Norway are in a Catholic realignment, moving away from the established church, which of course is Lutheran in practice, and they are faced with much revisionism. Therefore, they need an exit ramp. They need an exit strategy. So they want to be in dialogue with people who have found the exit ramp. And we've been on that ramp for a good, if you look at the things hanging from the ceiling, 25 years, if not more. And so we have conversations with them. That resulted in the lower right corner, you see myself with Canon Jeffrey Neal, who you know from the United Kingdom. We were invited to a conference in the Nordic Catholic Church in Oslo in January on ecclesiology, the basis of which was the conversations that we had on ecclesiology at Forward in Faith. I was asked to respond to some of the NCC concerns regarding the Union of Scranton and Anglicanism. And coincidentally, I had just been with Bishop Lipka and his team with the Polish National Church the week before. So I was able to talk intelligently, I hope, about that with them. And so it turned out to be really providential. Those things happened within a week of each other. Canon Neil gave an English perspective, and it created a good dialogue. And so that was the photo op at the end of the Mass for that weekend. In the top right corner, we were invited to a conference on church planting through Bishop Hewitt's efforts through FACA, the Mission Province. Basically would like to know about church planting. So one of the elements of FACA in relationship that is very strong is Anglican Mission, which I obviously have a relationship with. And so Bishop Philip Jones, the new apostolic vicar, went to Sweden and did a 2-day workshop on church planting, on how do you leave the established church and start from scratch and build a church. Does that sound familiar to anybody in this room? And Bishop Jones did a very capable job. You have to understand, just as this idea was foreign to many of us 25, 30 years ago, or for some earlier, this is totally foreign to the folks in Norway and Sweden. They've been the established church, they get the assignment, they get the keys, they open the door, and off they go. When you leave, and you have to leave property behind and all that goes with it, there's a learning curve how to be the church. So they've asked FACA and Forward in Faith and Anglican Mission, come and help us. You all have been down this road before. Can you help us? And I think certainly Bishop Jones did. I think he did a really excellent job in his presentation. And then just last week, I was in East Africa meeting with bishops from the Congo. And so in that picture in the lower left, you have the Bishop of Kindu, the Bishop of Bukavu, the Bishop of Boga Diocese, myself, and Archbishop Emmanuel Collini. And we were there to talk about a number of things. There were 2 other bishops involved, not in the picture, however, sadly. But we were there to talk, one of the things, in follow-up to the conversation that Bishop Ackerman initiated at Winter Conference for Anglican Mission on the Catholic Congress. And so I've been keeping our African brothers and partners apprised of the developments since Bishop Ackerman's conversation in February when he met with Archbishop Collini and the 10 African bishops who were visiting as mission partners. And so that trip there was partly an update. The other 2 dynamics of the meeting I'm not at liberty to discuss at this time, but they were very important in conversations. And so we go to places. We go to places that are not necessarily easy to get to. When I went to Malawi, and Dean Reed can relate to this, if you want to go visit the cathedral in Malawi, how do you get there, Bishop Iker? You get on a boat. And it's not a little boat ride, is it, Bishop Iker? It's a very long boat ride. It's a 6-hour boat ride. And it is not, I repeat, a luxury yacht by any stretch of the imagination. But I will say this, it's well worth the trip. So, our ministry is one ministry for Forward in Faith globally, and it's that Catholicity as an expression of ecclesiology is intrinsic to the vocation of the church. That's the message that has been articulated this year, trying to lead up to the Congress for 2015. And so as intrinsic vocation of the church, we have to call for an integration and reconciliation of the church throughout the world that claims Catholicity as Anglicans. We can't be these little bubbles bouncing off of or into each other. It's not going to work. It will not be an effective Catholic witness to say we are an amalgam of bubbles. So while we recognize the bubbles exist, pro tem, we also recognize that it cannot continue. And so if we claim this Catholic heritage, we cannot follow the easier course, which has been autonomy above unity. It must be unity over autonomy. And that's what we pray the Congress will begin a new understanding of that for Anglicans in 2015. And so we don't have a logo yet. Canon Ed is working on it diligently for the Congress. But if you had to pick one, it's to gather people from north and south, east and west, and we use the compass rose, of course, for that, to come together as Anglicans, as conciliar Anglicans, and in a Congress to do a new work for a new ecclesiology and a new preferred future. This past year in 2013, 2014, we've been able to engineer a number of conversations in Northern Europe to that effect and in Africa. There's enthusiasm, there's engagement, there's desire, and I think those are the important ingredients in going forward. So that's what 2013, 2014 looked like in a thumbnail sketch with some bubbles for you. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those. What's that, Bishop Lipke? Bishop Lipke loves the bubbles. I'm going to get him a bubble bath. Lawrence Welk, there you go. I'm the new Lawrence Welk, I guess. That's not good. Yikes. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
The sizes of the bubbles, do they represent relative?
They do a bit. I mean, some are obviously larger than others. It's a combination of two pieces. One would be in terms of members, I guess, for lack of a better image, but also it's contextual in terms of some of these do not play as well in the sandbox with others, and so it requires some coaxing. You know, we've been in a state of isolationism for so long, given the battles that have occurred, that it's just easier to stick to yourself for some of those people. So the further they are away and the smaller they are, tends to be because it's more of a challenge to engage. That doesn't mean they're not going to engage. It doesn't mean they haven't engaged. It simply means it's going to take a little bit more. And the ones that are closer, obviously, we have a closer relationship with. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sister. Sorry. Didn't see the habit. No, I didn't see the habit, so I didn't want to say just yes, ma'am. Yes, sister. Okay.
Is there any way that we can get access to your bubbles?
Yeah, I think we can put it on the website, Michael, I guess, or...
On that website?
Yeah, we can upload to the website and you all can get it.
You can print it out?
Yeah, it's not proprietary. I mean, it's my thing, but I mean, it's... But, you know, this is not a CIA state secret or anything, so yeah, you're sure... well, I'm not completely sure, but to the best of my knowledge, it's not. So, well, yeah, I've been threatened with that on a number of visits already to various places, but actually, Michael's got it on the drive already anyway, so we can upload it, and I'm happy to do it. Anybody else?
Father?
Yeah, Father Height.
Could you send something to the magazine?
I'll be happy to write something up for you, as I try to be diligent in doing, but if you remind me, which you're very good at, I'll do it.
I'll send you an email.
Okay, that'd be great.
Question.
Yes, Father.
Do you think next year you could probably put some background music to that and have the bubbles?
I think in light of Michael's observation, we get some Lawrence Welk music. It really set a tone. Anybody else? Or maybe Bishop Lipke can sing, one or the other. Brother Kurt.
When you upload this to the website, can you put the whole presentation and not just the bubbles?
Yeah. I think we can, Michael, can't we? We can do the whole PowerPoint. Yeah. Yeah, happy to do it. Anybody else? Father Brooks.
Practical application.
Yes.
How can they all help?
Well, the first is to pray, because it sounds fairly simple and fairly easy to do, but it's not. Sometimes we have to unpack a lot of misperceptions and old baggage to initiate new conversations. So praying for wisdom and discernment that I don't say anything too ridiculous is always a good start. Secondly, I think I should tell you that the travels are funded by the Anglican Mission. And so it doesn't come out of Forward in Faith's pocket. So I know Anglican Mission gets a rap by a lot of people, but they actually fund the travels because they believe in FACA. So thank Anglican Mission would be the second practical thing, actually. And I think the third thing is when we move towards the Congress and you start to see the international players come into focus and there's a request for help, it could be in terms of travel, it could be in terms of putting these guys up. It's really important because they've shown us a significant level of hospitality in our travels. It would be helpful if we could do the same. Is that helpful, Michael? Okay. Anybody else? Bishop, you have anything you want to add?
Yes. One more thing to add.
Yep.
Aren't you excited that he's representing all of us when he's going around there? The alternative is that he will get you a suitcase and you can go with him. But he's our man on the road, and I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.